All right, so let's get into the questioning. Tell us a little bit about when you first joined the bench. Were you appointed or elected? Tell us about the process.
Okay, first thing I want to do though is thank you all for doing this program because judges are unknown to the public, and by doing this, you're performing a public service for everybody. Not only for us to get our information out to the public, but for the public to learn about their judges. So thank you very much for doing this. The Broward County Bar and the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association. Thank you. So anyway, here's how I joined the bench. In 2009, I was appointed by Charlie Chris to the bench. And then in 2010, I had an opponent and I won election. So I've gone through both the election process and the appointment process. And fortunate that the public retained me as their judge. And since then, I've served since 2009. I took the bench March 2nd, 2009.
What division are you currently in?
I'm in the civil division. The process, both processes involve politics. All processes involve politics. So, you have to expose yourself to either the people that are making the decision on the committee or to the public to get your selection as a judge.
Okay.
I'm in the civil division. I've
Tell us
served
a little bit.
well, before we get there, I'll finish that statement. I started off in the criminal division. I went to the family division for a year and a half. I then was in juvenile for about a year, and I've been in the civil division for the last, about the last 7 years.
Tell us a little bit about your family's national cultural background and what was your upbringing like?
Well, I was born in Cuba, and when I was 5 years old, that's when Castro had taken over, and my dad was an airline pilot for Cubana. So we lived in the outskirts of Havana, a suburb called Tarara. And after a few months, I think about 6 or 7 months, my dad figured out what was going on with Castro. And, him being a communist and also inviting Russians and MiGs flying into the airport, he was asked to train pilots, Cuban pilots, on MiGs. And he was also asked to make flights to South America, taking Che Guevara to South America. And he wanted to get out of Cuba. So what we did is, and this is kind of a long story, but it's worth telling. So what he did is that his regular flight for Cubana Airlines was from Havana to New York to Madrid. So we were able to leave myself, my mom, and my sister to New York on a visa, but he had to stay behind because one family member always had to stay behind to make sure that the other family members came back. So he stayed behind, and while we were in New York, and he was on his flight from Havana to New York to Madrid, he got off the plane in New York and asked for political asylum. And that started the process of us becoming U.S. citizens. And we asked for political asylum and became citizens a couple of years later. So that's the story. Now, I grew up in Broward County as compared to in Dade County. My dad was the aquatics director for the YMCA here in Fort Lauderdale. He had gotten that job. And from that, he started teaching scuba diving. He got all his certifications from the YMCA, NAUI, and PADI. He taught scuba diving. He taught me how to scuba dive when I was 10. I became an assistant instructor at age 19. And finally, I became an instructor at age 20, a scuba diving instructor. So he started a dive shop in the early 60s, mid 60s. And Ray had his own business, and eventually that's what he did. He taught scuba diving at Fort Lauderdale High School and Broward College and some of the different schools through the dive shop, which was called Dive and Sales over near Fort Lauderdale. So I grew up here in Broward County. And the interesting thing for me is, of course, I got exposure to my culture and the food and all that through my parents. But compared to Marina, my wife, I'm a novice because she grew up in Miami. And she had a lot of exposure to Cuban culture, a lot more than I did. So that's sort of my my background, and it's interesting for me. I learned new Cuban phrases all the time from Marina and things that my parents never taught me. So it's it's very interesting for me to compare how I grew up as compared to how she grew up in Miami.
Was there anything about your upbringing that was particularly helpful to you into getting to where you are today?
Well, I saw a couple of things. Number one is my mom's love. Carlos could do no wrong. I mean, so she loved everything I did. I was president of Honor Society. I graduated in the top 5 students from Fort Lauderdale High School. So she was like 101 support. I could have had straight D's and she still would have thought I was, wonderful. But also watching my dad, who basically, when he got here, couldn't be a pilot. He had to start all over again. And he changed from being a pilot to being a scuba instructor and an aquatics director. So, and watching his hard work, where one day when we get here, he's looking for jobs, digging ditches. And then he was looking for jobs in the airlines. And then he starts his own business a year later, starting first in Houston, where he was the aquatic director at the YMCA in Houston, and then here in Fort Lauderdale. We basically traveled all over the country and decided to settle here. So watching his hard work and basically living the American dream, where he starts with nothing, changes careers 100%. And when he retired, he owned apartments, he owned a commercial building, and he had the dive shop. And, he was basically the American dream every which way. And I know that's a common story. Fortunately, it's a common story. So that's my background. I saw his challenges, and it inspired me to, to continue to study, to continue to do well in school, and to graduate from Furman University and University of Florida Law School. So that was my experience watching them.
Tell us in your own words, why is it important to have cultural diversity on the bench?
All right, well, a couple of things that I left out getting to that is the other thing that inspired me to be a judge is I've always wanted to get into the legal profession since at least the early years of college. And one of the reasons was because I used to date George Tedder Jr.'s daughter. And so I was at their house all the time, and I saw Judge Tedder and, everything he went through to make a fair and just decision, and all the work doesn't stop. The work does not stop at 5 o'clock for a judge. The work continues because you're mulling over what you're going to do the next day. You're second guessing every decision that you've made, and it's a continuous process. And I witnessed that with Judge Tedder. He would come home and he would, talk about some of the issues that he had during the day. And it was pretty inspirational to see the hard work that went into it. So that was a big inspiration. He was like a second father to me, really. All right, so your question was, why is cultural diversity on the bench important? Well, all I can say is appearances matter. It's very important that judges reflect the community, because that causes the community to have confidence and to support the judicial system. It avoids the appearance, and appearances are important, that any one group of people is imposing their will on another group. So by having diversity on the bench, you're showing the community we care about you. And, with the riots that are going on now and the Black Lives Matter movement, it's very, very important that the community have confidence in the judicial system.
Are we where we need to be in Broward County with diversity on the bench, or do we have a ways to go?
We have a ways to go, and I want to say, as far as Hispanics, we are not proportional to the population of Hispanics in Broward County. But the thing that I've noticed, see, I've been in practicing in Broward since 1980. My office has always been in Broward. And one thing I've noticed is we do have more Hispanic judges now than we did back in the beginning in 1980. There were basically, weren't any when I first got here in 1980. I mean, Jose Gonzalez was a circuit court judge from Tampa, and he was of Cuban background, and he was elevated to the federal bench. But there really hadn't been any Hispanic judges in Broward. So Hispanic judges have increased from that time. As to Black judges, the thing I've noticed is that Black judges have not increased. We have about the same number of Black judges now as we did earlier in Broward County. The percentage population-wise is there's a great disparity, and there's a great need to bring the judges into conformity with the minority communities. I mean, you definitely want every minority to have confidence in the judicial system. And like I said before, part of that is increasing the number of minority judges. And, I really haven't seen much of a change as far as black judges. We need more black judges as well.
Since we're speaking about that topic, as it relates to culturally diverse candidates for judge, are there any special challenges or considerations that they face if they're trying to be elected or appointed?
Well, I think that whoever gets appointed has to reach a level of qualification. There has to be a certain level of qualification. I really don't think that's a problem. There are plenty of qualified Hispanic and qualified black lawyers that would be qualified to serve as judges, and the ones that are there are definitely qualified. The challenge is really either having the connections to get appointed. You have to have some sort of political connection and endorsement by, political persons that have influence, and having money if you're going to run an election. I mean, in Broward, it takes $200,000 to run a county-wide election at a minimum, and that's not, crossing every T and dotting every I, but it takes that much. So it is important to go through the steps of meeting the right people that can help you, either if you're going to run for election or if you're going to get appointed. So that's a challenge. Other challenges, maybe you get judged a little bit harsher, if you're a minority judge. Just like sometimes female judges get judged or get evaluated a little harsher than male judges. That does happen. For example, I mean, I'm in court and I'm relaxed. It's a lot like this interview. You come into court, I talk to you, and we, discuss. Maybe we talk about, my haircut not having been cut for the last 4 months, and that's just kind of maybe some lighthearted to try to reduce tension. When I see Marina in court, she's very much more formal, and I think there's a feeling amongst minority and female judges that they have to be more formal in order to be accepted. So those are some of the things that I've just kind of noticed.
Switching gears a little bit, tell us about the type of work you did before becoming a judge.
Well, before becoming a judge, I started off in criminal. I was chief assistant, one of the chief assistant public defenders from 1984 and 1985. And then I got hired by a civil firm that did insurance plaintiffs work and insurance defense work. And I was primarily doing insurance defense work at that firm. It was Fazio, Dawson, DeSalvo, and Cannon when I was there. And then a few years later, I left and opened up on my own. I had several insurance clients, Oak Casualty, State Farm, Chubb has been a defense client, Southern Group Indemnity. So I had defense work. And I started transitioning into plaintiffs work really towards the end of the 90s, primarily plaintiffs work. So I was doing insurance defense and plaintiffs personal injury. And when I was in the public defender's office, I was trying about 20 cases per year. And when I was with Fazio Dawson and doing defense work, I was trying about 20 cases per year. And then when I started plaintiffs work, I was trying about 6 cases a year. A little bit different because, you can resolve a lot of them. So that's what I was doing, trial work. Had over 200 jury trials before I became a judge.
You told us a little bit about what's motivated you to become a judge previously. Anything else that's motivated you to become a judge?
Well, it's a way to give back to the community. It's public service. It's the reason I always wanted to be a judge when I started, definitely, was because it's the pinnacle of a career. I think as a lawyer, judges are on a different level, and I always saw that. And so, especially having known Judge Tedder, I had a lot of respect for him, obviously, and that was always my goal, was to become a judge, and it was just a question of the timing. I had applied to become a judge back in the late 80s, and because at that point I was transitioning, I was in my own practice, but I'm kind of glad it didn't happen back then, because I had a very successful practice for the next 19 years after that. So, the timing turned out to be perfect. The timing is always in God's hands, as to when it happens. And fortunately for me, it happened at the right time. So it was good. I can't
Are there
complain.
anything, are there any things about being a judge that you weren't aware of prior to taking the bench that now have opened your eyes?
Yeah, one thing is the job never ends. Everybody thinks it's easy, but uh, you have to act on the spot. You have to think on your feet. You have to rule quickly on many things. If you don't do that, you immediately start getting backlogged. And when you start getting backlogged, you can't catch up because there's just too many cases. So a lot of times you do the best you can on your feet, and you have to rely on your experience and your knowledge of the law. Another thing that surprised me about being a judge, when I was interviewed by the Judicial Nominating Committee, one of the questions they asked is, what are you going to do when a lawyer comes in front of you in an area that you don't have experience in? And my answer was, well, I'm going to rely on the lawyers to educate me on the law in that particular area. And no, that doesn't happen a lot. A lot of times it does, but a lot of times lawyers come in and they don't know the answer one way or the other, or they haven't done the research, or they're not ready, and you have to educate yourself and do your own research. I will turn on my computer during a hearing and start doing research if I need to. I certainly do that during trials because I have the time to do it. But even during a hearing, I'll look up a case or whatever that I need to look at to make a determination. So how much you have to do on your feet is always, a challenge. The other thing that happens a lot of times is, lawyers are litigation attorneys because they like to persuade. That's what they do. They persuade. Well, a lot of times they try to persuade you and they're persuaded themselves, but they really don't know what they're talking about. So you have to look behind every statement. You have to look behind everything and make sure that the record is clear, that that's what happened. And, two lawyers on opposite sides often do not agree. That happens. Or I wouldn't be here as a judge.
Since having taken the bench, has anything changed with respect to being a Hispanic judge?
Well, there's more Hispanic judges. There's more of a community of Hispanic judges. There's more of a community of Hispanics. I was the first, I was certainly the first Cuban to ever attend Furman University in South Carolina. And people were like, they couldn't grasp the idea of me being Cuban. I had people asking me, where is Cuba as well? So, and of course, Broward County isn't quite that bad, but, the influx of Hispanics to Broward is much more recent than it was into Dade. So, that was one thing that I noticed.
Which takes us to our next question. Have you witnessed or experienced discrimination in your lifetime or even been the target of it? And what have you learned from those experiences?
Well, I don't think have I noticed it? I haven't noticed it because I always try to move forward. I always try to move forward. I really haven't had any per se experience. I mean, I was in sixth grade back when I was a black belt in judo. I had another kid try to beat me up because I was the teacher's pet, but I'm not sure that was because I was Hispanic or I was the teacher's pet. And in any case, he failed miserably. So, but I don't doubt that there is, certainly when lawyers have accents, when skin color is black, I don't doubt that there are, instances of discrimination. So.
With respect to the qualities of a good judge, being well-rounded, dedicated, and hardworking, are there any other qualities that you believe are important for a judge to have?
Well, the two biggest qualities, I think, are a sense of fairness. I mean, when you see something that is going terribly wrong, you have to understand that. You have to see it and understand it. So a sense of fairness, I think, is very, very important. You wouldn't believe how many times I sit there as a judge and I see things going sideways and upside down and whatever, and really I can't intervene. I can't do anything about it. But at least you have to be able to recognize that when it's going on. So I think that sense of fairness is very important. The other thing that it requires, which I think is sometimes understated, is you have to be smart and you have to be smart on your feet. Otherwise, you end up with everything getting reversed and making wrong decisions. So those two qualities I think are very important, as well as thinking on your feet.
For those who want to become a judge, how important is it to have access to things like good education, internships, clerkships, and having access to mentors? Is there a difference that can make, and any specific one of those things?
Is there a difference? Yeah, there's a big difference. The reason I was hired by the public defender's office is because I had met and taught scuba diving to numerous state attorneys, numerous judges, and numerous, defense attorneys. So I was known at the courthouse. I therefore got an internship with Al Schreiber my first year of law school, a paid internship, and had a paid internship until I graduated from law school. So I literally worked at the public defender's office the summer before I entered law school. And it was just because they knew me and they knew that I was a good student and they knew I was smart. So there's an example of, socializing and social contacts and the type of difference they can make. And then of course, after my internship, I was hired by the public defender's office. Now, if I'd stayed in Gainesville, I worked as an intern in the state attorney's office, and I had a lot of contacts with the state attorney's office, and I could have applied for a job there, but I wanted to come back to Broward County. So internships are very, very important. I'm in contact with a lot of my interns. I love having interns that are open-minded and fresh in the law and optimistic. The optimism they have is inspiring to me. So it's
Since you
important.
brought up interns, let's skip to two questions. Are there any specific types of interns or mentees that you especially enjoy mentoring? Anything about their qualities, go-getters or great listeners, willing to do anything?
The great thing about your questions is they give me a chance to answer or to think about the last question. So I was thinking, the other thing about internships and social contacts is, I mentioned that when I left Fazio Dawson, I did insurance defense work. Well, that was because I've been doing insurance defense work with Fazio Dawson. And the claims manager of one of the companies loved my work, had seen me in trial, 30 or 40 times, and started giving me defense work. And then when State Farm, the reason that I got State Farm is initially they hired me as defense counsel, but ultimately I was hired by State Farm and given a pretty decent amount of cases just myself because one of the managers at State Farm knew me because they had taken my scuba class. And I had certified them. So you cannot minimize your social contacts. You can't minimize the impression you make on other people because it will impact and bring you success in your career. Now, as far as your question was about interns,
Yes.
All right.
What are some qualities you look for in a good intern?
Open-minded is very, very important. And what I try to do with the interns is like, I'll have a hearing and I'll make a certain ruling and then we'll step outside, one or two of the many rulings that I make. And I'll say, well, do you know why I made that ruling the way I did? And then they'll answer that question. And then I'll tell them, my thinking behind the law or the facts in that case that led to that ruling. So I try to educate the interns on how judges, or at least this judge, thinks in making decisions, which I would think would be very valuable. Also, when there's lawyers that are making mistakes, even though I can't fix them or doing a great job, I will tell the intern, I will ask, what did you think of that presentation? What did you think was good? What did you think was bad? And they are getting that experience, if they want to be litigators, of how to behave in court.
Wrapping up here, last question, tell us about networking. Is it beneficial to legal professionals?
Absolutely. After, like I said, a lot of the contacts I made were in the legal profession that led to future contracts, future employment. And I never did any advertising on the plaintiff side. All my plaintiff's cases were word of mouth. So obviously, contacts in the community, contacts with other clients recommending you were, you got to remember I'm kind of a dinosaur, but they were very important, certainly in the 80s and 90s and early part of 2000. So yeah, it absolutely will help you in your success.
Well, Judge, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to answer our questions. We appreciate you sitting, and we will certainly see you again at the event coming up.
All right, and I'll try to get a haircut for the next event that comes up. All right, thank you all so much. But
Thank you.
with this coronavirus, I've been putting it off. So
Thanks,
thank
Judge.
you. Thank you.